Spoiler warning. The following contains spoilers for Naruto, One Piece, Fairy Tail, Dragon Ball, and Black Clover. Of all the many common elements of storytelling, perhaps the most universally beloved is the time skip. I mean, what's more fun than a time skip? You get new designs, characters, and ideas. A time skip is an injection of energy in any story. For shonen anime in particular, the time skip is a staple device used to propel the narrative and keep the audience on their toes. There are different ways to use time skips. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure utilizes large time skips between each arc in its generational format. My Hero Academia uses small skips to bridge its more unconnected arcs. But there's one type of time skip that has always seemed the most interesting to anime fans. That being that classic one-time only time skip that you'll likely see in One Piece, Naruto, or Dragon Ball. Black Clover fans were hyped earlier this year when Tabata rolled out its time skip, that one major transformation that irreparably changes the world and the characters that inhabit it. These changes are often so epic in nature that you could literally change the show's name. To some extent, Dragon Ball Z and Naruto Shippuden actually do. In shonen anime, the staple idea of all these time skips is progression. When it comes to characters, that progression normally comes in two main ways: power and maturity. The story, meanwhile, also progresses in the scope of its world, the scale of its conflict, and the depth and range of its ideas. And that idea of progression, of rapid growth, is what people love about time skips. People love to see characters they've come to love change and watch the world change around them. However, it is just as interesting when shows subvert the very thing that fans come to love and thus expect. Because of how it both uses and subverts the classic time skip format, I find Naruto's time skip to be one of the best in shonen. To understand why, I'll explain why I personally think time skips work so well, and what I think Naruto's does differently and what it does for it as a story. Many stories are structured in a 3-act format, consisting of the setup, the confrontation, and the resolution. The setup establishes a status quo for the story, and introduces the characters and the general setting. The confrontation occurs when an inciting incident sets the story in motion. The resolution contains the climax of the story through its conclusion. Not all stories use this framework, but it is very common in storytelling. The Land of Waves, for example, can be roughly split into 3 acts: the establishment of the mission, the introduction of Zabuza, and the battle on the bridge. Anime have multiple arcs, and these arcs can also fit into the larger story's 3-act structure. For example, you could roughly split One Piece's East Blue Saga into 3 acts, with each arc belonging to one separate act. One potential problem of repeating this structure in a long story is that it can become exhausting to the audience. Stories foster engagement by building tension over time, until it is eventually released at the conclusion. But if a new story arc tries to create tension too quickly once again, the audience never gets a chance to catch their breath. If I'm feeling good that a character just scored a major win, diminishing its importance by plunging that character immediately into more turmoil sours my enjoyment of the previous arc. A time skip allows the audience a moment to breathe and reflect on what has happened, as well as get themselves into the mindset of accepting the coming challenges to come. Using a time skip also lets you build clusters of arcs as stories of their own. A climax that occurs as the result of tension built up over 4 or 5 arcs is more intense and powerful than that of a single arc. Going back to One Piece, the Marineford arc is the climax of the entire Grand Line saga, and is unsurprisingly one of the most popular anime arcs ever because it capitalizes on the tension built up over multiple arcs. And when you create such a high, how do you come down from it without causing a letdown? As well, how do you prepare yourself to top it? Well, hitting the hard reset button is a perfect way to do so. In summary, the time skip allows storytelling to reach higher highs by letting an author neatly split up a story into smaller stories that have individual peaks, and it also gives authors an easy way to satisfy and re-energize an audience mid-story. Time skips work so well because they act as a signal that we intuitively understand as an audience. We shift our mindset to embrace change, that of course being the new characters, powers, designs, and setting. Knowing that the story will progress and elevate to new levels is exciting. Naruto's time skip is so interesting because it subverts part of this formula by progressing the themes, world, and all the characters, except for the main character, Naruto. I've regularly heard people say that they don't like Naruto's time skip, that nothing really changes, and nothing cool or interesting comes as a result of it. And I totally get where they're coming from with this. Naruto doesn't have any new insane form, or any new cool technique, or huge redesign. The design changes for all the characters are actually pretty light and practical, but not particularly exciting, which I actually appreciate because it makes more sense in universe as they basically are soldiers. But we also don't get a new expansion of the world. But there's underlying greatness to Naruto's time skip, in that it isn't used to explore new things that the main character can do. It explains what he did not do, and the impact it has on him as a character. I love it because the people I talked about earlier are right. Naruto kicks off his time skip pretty much the same as he was before. During Naruto's approximate 2-year hiatus, all of Naruto's generation progresses except for him. Kishimoto could have easily set up the first arc as a new Chunin exam, where the young shinobi show off their skills in order to rank up. But you are instead greeted immediately with a surprise. Everyone else is already a Chunin, well, except for Naruto, of course. And it makes perfect sense. Naruto was gone training with Jiraiya for 2 years, while everyone else was going through normal life. The exams happen twice a year, so it makes sense for the others to use their 3 or 4 extra chances to advance. There's no logical reason why they had to wait for Naruto. He's just a classmate to them, and they have their own dreams and ambitions. And why would even Naruto or Jiraiya remember to enter? Becoming a Chunin has nothing to do with Naruto's motivation of saving Sasuke. Kishimoto could have easily pandered to fans with a mighty re-entry arc, but kept in mind the motivations of his characters and what he believed they were most likely to do. So you're hit with a surprising revelation which, in hindsight, should have been obvious. But then you're hit with a few more surprises. Neji and Temari are already Jonin, while Gaara is Kazekage. Gaara, who Naruto taught the value of camaraderie and love of others to, surpasses Naruto not just in the power scale, but by achieving the goal that Naruto can still only dream of: gaining acceptance and becoming a leader. We're only 3 chapters into the new story, and Naruto seems further away from achieving his goal than before the time skip. Sure, we do get a small battle when Naruto and Sakura best Kakashi, but it's not like Luffy's triumphant return to Sabaody. They only managed to steal a belt from him, a task they struggle mightily to do, and only succeed in through cheap but funny tactics. This works great, adding more tension, as his window to rescue Sasuke is rapidly closing despite his lack of progression. The first few arcs show just how far Naruto really is from his goal, and how little he has changed by showing his lack of physical and, more importantly, ideological and emotional growth. Naruto failed to rescue Sasuke in part 1 because he failed to understand Sasuke and could not control his own anger or power. The same problems haunt Naruto at the start of Shippuden. I find the first half of Naruto Shippuden to be fascinating because I have rarely seen the main character take as many continuous L's as Naruto does for as long as he does. Until the Pain Invasion, Naruto's victories are few and far between. In the Kazekage rescue arc, he manages to beat Itachi, but no, it's a fake. But then, he does go on to beat Deidara and saves Gaara. Oh wait, no, Gaara is dead when he arrives, and Kakashi does most of the damage to Deidara before he escapes, even saving the entire squad with his new Mangekyo abilities. Naruto does inspire Chiyo to save Gaara, but at the end of the arc, he hesitates to shake Gaara's hand, because he knows just how unsatisfactory his quote-unquote victory was. He was almost useless. Sakura, Chiyo, and Kakashi all did more than him in his opening arc. This is at least somewhat rare in my experience. Sure, in shows like Dragon Ball Z and Fairy Tail, the main character is portrayed as a bit out of their league coming out of a time skip, but in each of them, the main character is re-established as the powerful champion of the known verse by the end of that arc. Naruto is frankly pathetic in this arc, spending more time crying than fighting. In the next arc, Naruto does even less of his own power. At Tenki Bridge, Naruto completely loses control of his power and goes 4 tails against Orochimaru. Ever since Naruto vs Sasuke Part 1, Nine Tails mode has been portrayed as unstable and self-destructive. When Naruto uses it against Neji and Gaara, He is actively controlling it, but Naruto's lack of sufficient conviction or direction after confronting Sasuke is mirrored by the regression of his control over Ninetales. Naruto purposefully allowed Kurama to take control in the search for power, a destructive route that makes him no better than Sasuke, whom he tried to lecture at the Final Valley. Kabuto goes as far as to say Naruto is more of a monster than he is a shinobi, because he sacrifices ideals as well as himself in search of raw power. Yamato lectures him about taking shortcuts, telling him how he will end up hurting himself and others. He is of course right, seeing as Naruto just entered Sakura as well as himself because he ceded control. Naruto takes this lesson to heart, suppressing Ninetales in his encounter with Sasuke, but without Ninetales he is thoroughly dismantled in a fight. Sasuke spares his life on a whim, and leaves because there's no real point to killing him. Naruto also isn't even close to getting him to return, and has no reasoning or convincing argument for why he should. Naruto lost his first fight with Sasuke because he couldn't control his power and failed to understand him. And here, he loses again because he still can't control his power and still hasn't learned anything about understanding him. He is still the same person he was 2 years ago. The next arc focuses on Naruto training to gain the power needed to stop Sasuke, and the reader finally gets the catharsis of seeing Naruto get a big win against Kakazu. Except not really once again. You see, Naruto only wins because he has a new move, the Rasen Shuriken, but he is immediately told afterward that he can never use it again because of the effect that it has on his body. I think it's purposeful that the first opponent Naruto beats without using his patented Talk no Jutsu is such a letdown. Power is not enough. Power has never been enough. And Naruto says just as much just before the 5 Kage summon when discussing how to beat Sasuke. He needed ideology and power that he could truly make his own, and he starts down that path during the Pain arc. Naruto beats Pain with skills he acquired with his hard-earned Sage Mode, and then he truly defeats him through pacifism and his assertion that overcoming hatred is the answer to what Pain is and what Sasuke is quickly becoming. He has not found his final answer quite yet, but his development on that front is rewarded with victory for the first time since Kabuto, for the most part at least. Naruto goes on to use his power and ideology to win over Kurama, and finally master his strength, allowing his character to come together as a whole on the war arc. These developments would not have been as satisfying or even possible if Naruto did not struggle so much early on in Shippuden. The conclusion of Naruto and Pain's conflict is in chapter 450. Shippuden begins at chapter 245, and Naruto's last significant ideological victory would have been against Kabuto in chapter 169. You could therefore argue that for between 200 and 300 chapters of a 700 chapter manga, at least 30% of the full series or more, the main character doesn't have a triumphant win. He spends most of that time losing, or having hollow victories. This is an incredibly interesting way to write your story, and it is all made possible because of the way Kishimoto uses the time skip. If Naruto had a Neji or Gaara-esque victory to start off part 2, it would undermine the development of his ideology and character for the sake of cheap audience satisfaction. Naruto gets some small wins, but faces far greater losses. The Pain Assault is so powerful for me as a reader, because it is the culmination of all the pain I saw a character I care about go through for over 200 straight chapters. In my opinion, Naruto as a series would be worse off without this dark chapter, especially since Naruto's minimization of the story allows for characters like Chio, Sakura, Sai, Sasuke, and Shikamaru to shine. So yes, Naruto doesn't get better or cooler after the time skip. And many people's assertion that OG Naruto is much better than Shippuden is probably rooted in Naruto's lack of accomplishments until Pain. But I think it is better to interpret what was interesting about that narrative choice, instead of focusing on how we as fans may not have gotten what we initially wanted or expected. Other stories in Shonen use similar elements, and Naruto plays into Shonen tropes just as much as it bucks them. But I wanted to highlight what Naruto does so right with this idea. By not playing by the rules and working with audience expectations, it allows the series to explore characters and ideas that it otherwise could not. While at the outset, it seemed like a normal vanilla storytelling decision, it became the thing I found most interesting about the series. It is possible to do an infinite amount of creative and interesting new things with old ideas, tropes, and storytelling devices. The time skip is one example of taking something people love and building on it, whether by playing it straight or taking it in an unforeseen direction. Kishimoto does a great job of using the expectations created in the reader when using this common storytelling device to create a truly interesting and memorable character arc for its titular character.